Hello and welcome to the Southbound Sports Show. I'm your host, Richie Leahy, here with my co-host, Maddie B. And before I even get into our agenda today, I wanted to talk about Sam Houston. So I didn't forget, they won the FCS championship over South Dakota State. You called it, Matt. I picked the other team. I thought South Dakota State would definitely pull it out. But because we pre-recorded, I don't think we actually... I'm getting my weeks all mixed up. I don't think we actually got to talk about the game, but a big move for them. I know we talked about programs not winning national championships in the lower level, even with their expanded program, but you're still getting schools like Sam Houston that was a first-time national champion. And so I think just having the expanded playoff gives them a chance. And I'm going to get into my thoughts later on in the show as we go through college football over and unders. But I didn't know if you watched the game and if you had anything you wanted to talk about.
I mean, I thought it was a great game to watch. I could kind of tell with some of the earlier games when I was able to see Sam Houston play that their quarterback played really, really well, and he was one of the candidates that was up for I think it's like the Walter Payton Award, perhaps, or I think that's what they call like the FCS Heisman. So he was definitely a really good player, and congratulations to them for being able to pull the win off and finish the job.
Yeah, and for them, just one last bit, they won on a 10-yard touchdown pass with 16 seconds left, which leads me into our first topic for the show, which is the NHL playoffs. But very awesome. If you want to watch the highlights, you can go ahead and find it. And I think that's my beef with the NHL. Like, I'm watching FCS. You can find that highlight. You can find it on Twitter. The NCAA has it right on their website. They even have it broken down by like the full final touchdown drive. And so they were really trying to promote the game. I didn't actually see, I guess I should look it up real quick since we always talk about it, the TV ratings. But for the NHL, the Penguins, I don't know what the hell they're doing besides annoying me because they've been outplaying the Islanders. And I know some people might come at me and say that I'm a homer or whatever. But it seems like they're just making mistakes. Like Jari took that pass in double overtime, passed it right to him. Like he had guys, I saw a still frame, and that's why I was trying to watch it right before the show because I'm like, I'm not going to talk about it if I'm misremembering. Maybe it was like a heat of the moment. I'm calmed down. I better watch the highlight. I couldn't find it, man. You would think that the NHL has like a great, a great media that they're just putting out like, hey, here's a great game winner. In our playoffs, which is the most exciting time of the year, we should have that. Like it should be on ESPN. ESPN article, they're not even having the play. I go to NBC, their website's a complete mess. CBS didn't have it. Twitter didn't have it that I could find. They were more focused on clips of there was a fight or like whatever from before that I thought, oh, okay. Like I see that there's some anger there between the two teams. Not the game winner. If I'm searching for the game winner in your sport, I should be able to find it. So it was embarrassing. I clicked on like a Pittsburgh newspaper. They were like having their reporter just talk outside the stadium. So I don't know if the NHL doesn't allow people to see their highlights or like NBC, but for me to actually get the highlight and see the play, I had to go to the NHL.com and there was a 5-minute game recap video. The only place I could find the horrendous pass that lost them the game. But I don't know. Someone said that they were down 3-2 against the Lightning whenever they won the Cup last. Maybe you're right. But it just seems like you're unfocused. You can't make sloppy plays like that, not in the playoffs. So I just wanted to bring that up. Did you watch any of the hockey so far in the playoffs?
Yeah, I have watched, and it's tough because they should be winning this series, but just they're making mistakes that they really shouldn't be making.
And that's the one thing too, because the The Capitals are kind of doing the same thing, and they're already gone. Like, they're out of the playoffs. And so just to have that type of like feeling, I think the Penguins are done. Like, whenever you don't have that level of excitement, or like, it's not even that, like, you're going to overtime. How many games went to overtime? I'm trying to look. 2 so far. But both games in overtime they lost. Like, you win those games, it's over. Like, you should not be losing your composure in overtime. But now you're 1 game away from going home. You're going to New York. It just doesn't feel like there's no excitement. I see some other like teams like they're like, oh yeah, they're gonna turn it around. They're gonna turn it around. I see it down here. I mean, Carolina's down right now to Nashville 2-1. So by the time you hear this, you'll probably know who won that game. But like, there's still an excitement over the Hurricanes, thinking like, oh, they're gonna win this series and they're gonna make a deep run. But I haven't seen that type of positivity, I guess, in the Penguins fan base. And there has to be some type of feeling just because of watching them for how many years in the playoffs. I just don't think it's going to end well. But that's it. Do you have anything else for the Penguins?
No, I don't think they're out, but I think they have to start playing cleaner hockey. Just not taking the dumb penalties and getting pulled into it. It's another one of those games where I feel like the series where they've had issues in the past with the New York Rangers and with the Washington Capitals, where they're playing outside of their style, and they get pulled into these games where like the Islanders are being physical with them, and instead of just playing their own style and pushing the puck, they get caught into something like these messy, like trying to fight with people when they're not really that style of team.
And that's where, I mean, like, they had a chance to win. The Islanders goalie had that leg save. I think it was in overtime. Maybe it was late in the third. I can't remember. But all I'm just watching, like, you look at this and you think, like, oh, like you said, the Capitals, they're always going to play them tough. It's like a rivalry game. Guess what? They're out. So you now have a clear path as long as you take care of the team you're supposed to beat. Like, you should be in the Eastern Conference Finals. So like, that's what I'm looking at, and just looking at the bracket and seeing that, it's almost like, all right, you're gonna blow this, and you're gonna have a 3-4 matchup in your region in the second round. So just something that I'm not looking forward to. There were 2 sweeps out west with Winnipeg and Colorado, which Colorado, I mean, that should have been, I mean, that's not what the Penguins could have been, but the Penguins could have been already done with the series 4-1, like I said, if they just put it together in overtime. But it's going to be something we'll be checking on next week. Like, I have a feeling they're going to be out, so it's going to be something that we'll see if I'm wrong. In terms of just random, I'm going to throw it in here. The NBA, because we normally talk about the NBA playoffs. They had that play-in tournament or whatever, and I was just wondering, like, did that even do anything? Because like, you're playing a 9 and 10 or whatever, and so I mean, the Lakers won in the West. They were the 7th seed going in. They were automatically the 7th seed. Golden State ended up losing. They were the 8th seed. They lost to the 9th seed. Okay, so they were in. Not a big deal. On the other side, the Celtics, right there, they won. They're the 7th seed. So both 7 seeds won. I mean, they both had, well, I was going to say winning records, but Boston was 500. The Lakers had a pretty good winning record going in. And then the 8th seed advanced, Washington. And like, I really don't think you're going to see a lot of difference going forward in the playoffs, because like I said, there's really no incentive for you. Like, Charlotte played, they were 33 and 39. They lost in the first play-in game. It's like, well, what are they trying to do? They have to win twice and then win a series against the number 1 seed. There's not really any high incentive for that. And so now they're talking about, oh, that went well. They're going to go back to their idea for a midseason play, like a midseason tournament. But still, like, you have to draw in some type of fans. And so I just don't know what they're going to do going forward. But if these ratings come back for this playoff and they're low, then I think that they're going to be in a world of hurt. But did you have any thoughts on that, or do you want to give any thoughts on the Sixers going in?
Well, I was happy that they won their first game. I was curious to see how they're going to play, and I like that they started off pretty good.
And that's a big one, too, because they are the number 1 seed, and they get to play Washington that already had to play the play-in games. So they're coming in. They lost that first game against the Celtics, and then they had to play another one. So you're coming in with 2 extra games. Like, I really don't see how they would lose that series. Memphis did beat the Jazz on the other side. They came in, they were like the 9th seed or whatever. They came in and they've been playing hot. And so I wonder if you're going to see the other thing where it's more along the lines of one team gets hot and they go forward. But it's going to be something that I think the NBA is going to look at, because I would have been shocked, and it hasn't happened yet. So maybe the Jazz just roll off 4 wins in a row and they end it. But I would be shocked if one of those teams that were in the playoff tournament, if they advance to the next round. I think you've seen it in the NBA where the lower seeds never advance. Like, it's unlike the other sports. Like with baseball, you always see wild card teams go far. In hockey, you always see some of the lower seeds go far and win the cup. In basketball, you almost never see it, just because the talent just isn't there on those other teams. Like, there's a reason they went 500. You don't need to add 2 more teams that are below 500 into your playoffs. It just doesn't make sense. Like, if you were doing half of it, like if you were taking the 5 through 10 seed or whatever, and you're making them all play, then maybe you might see some things like shift around, like seeding. But that's not, they played it too safe. And so you're like, your sport already takes the top couple teams. Those are the teams that typically win. Like, I wonder if I could even find a list. Because I don't think there's like anything. Like, we talked about college football. You want to see, you're like, oh, only the top couple seeds are ever going to win. And even in the 14 playoff, you don't, like, it doesn't back that up so far. Like in the NBA, like, no, that's how it goes. Because, like, here we go, by seed. I don't know how far back this goes. This is from 2012. So most of them, yeah. So I don't think it's changed. The number 1 seeds from either side have won 49 of the championships. The number 2 seed, and this is like, 8 years old now? Number 2 seeds won 10. Number 3 seeds won 7, and only one number 4 seed had ever won. And then the lowest seed were the 1995 Houston Rockets at a number 6 seed. But that was kind of like the season where, wasn't that when Jordan was out?
I think so.
So, like, that was like an asterisk. But it's crazy that you only have those and you decide, oh yeah, 7 and 8 seeds have never won it. Let's make it even harder for them to win it. Like, it makes 0 sense. I don't know who's in the back room thinking that. They're like, oh yeah, those guys never win. Let's make it even harder. That's what the college football one, everyone's like, oh, go to 16 team playoff, go to a 12 or a 10 and give those top teams the bye. It's like, why? You're the same guy complaining that Alabama and Clemson has been playing for most of the national championships, yet you want to give them a bye? Like, it makes no sense. So that's my last thought on that. Do you have anything else on any other sports before we get into our football talk?
No.
All right. I did want to say I could not find the TV ratings for that Sam Houston one, which is kind of interesting. Maybe if I take the FCS out of it, because that's going to be the one that bothers me if I don't. Because we talked about it, and I just wanted to compare just like what the other ones are. Because we see it all the time. You're playing outside of like your typical season. And so that's where you come in. And actually 7 hours ago, they announced the playing game viewers for the NBA. 5 million. Let's see. Doesn't even say what the other ones were. So one of the games, I guarantee it was Golden State and the Lakers, which I think it is. That was 5 million viewers, which was right below their New Year's, or not the New Year's, the Christmas Day viewers, the Lakers and the Mavericks. 5 million people. But like 5 million people for the NBA, the college basketball tournament had more viewers than that, Matt. Like, it makes zero sense how they pay so much money for the NBA, but they're only getting 5 million viewers. But like, just to put it in perspective, that's the type of viewers that like a Northwestern versus Wisconsin football game would get in college football. The other one, one of the games was 1 million, which is, let's see, I don't know, 1.2 million, 1.4 million. I wish they would just put it out. So you know it's bad when they don't just list the games like they do for like for college football or whatever. Because then you would have it. Yeah. I don't know. I don't have anything else. I don't see it for the FCS. I was hoping that I would have that comparison. So now you're probably looking and thinking I have a lot of dead time this show, but I just don't have the numbers. I should have looked it up. Should have known I was going to bring it up. But let's get into football talk. Aaron Rodgers, Matt. I've been talking about it for a couple weeks now, and he skips OTAs along with his receivers. Some of you saw this. You probably don't do Aaron Rodgers research like I do lately. Aaron Rodgers research is my new Gruden. What was the Gruden watch that Tennessee did?
Groomer.
Yeah, the groomers. That's it. Where they had all those rumors. We spent expensive time on it. You even have a stalker now because of it. So now this will be mine. Aaron Rodgers will call into the show because he'll say, like, why do you keep talking about me all the time? So he's out. Devontae Adams skipped, which we talked about, like the players skipping them, they get injured at home, working at home. Like, I wouldn't even go in, to be honest. But 4 of their other pass catchers, Adams, Valdez Scantling, Alan Lazard, Devin Funchess, and Brown. Don't know who Brown is. I know Funchess. I didn't even realize he was there. Because like he's like a wide receiver. He played tight end at Michigan. But that's one of those ones where they talked about my man Tebow. Did he end up signing that deal?
Yeah, he's in for right now.
Because it's just a workout deal, right? So they now there's rumors that like Urban Meyer is way over his head. He's signing Tim Tebow. It's like, all right, like what are you talking about? Because what's the difference if he has a guy come in at tight end that he knows is a flexible / running back / passer? Like, it's not like he's signing dudes that are like 100 years old. And it's not like Tom Brady just won a Super Bowl bringing in a bunch of his retired friends / cast-offs. Like, there's a reason a bunch of those dudes were, available. It's like, it's not like Tom Brady was like, hey, he's not doing like an Aaron Rodgers where he's like, I'm going to get guys from all over to come out. But my Aaron Rodgers watch, going back to that, it's like, all right, like what's going to happen? Like, what's going to be the worst scenario here for the Packers? Like, are they going to be desperate? Like, if I'm watching both teams, Urban Meyer's bringing in guys that are building around his team. The Packers are on an all-out hey, you know what we're going to do? We're just going to go ahead and pretend like it's not happening. And we're just going to keep going. And the coach came out and was like, hey, we really, really wish we could have Aaron Rodgers. I mean, he has to be shitting his pants, right? Because a year ago or 2 years ago, they were talking about how he was a great head coach. Let's get him a random quarterback and see how great of a coach he is, Matt. Because like we hear it all the time, like, oh, so-and-so was a great game manager. Or like, what was it, the Rams coach? How he had such a killer offense. And then they lose, like, what was that Super Bowl? It was so boring when Tom Brady beat them. It was like 10-7 or something like that. Like, where was the high-powered offense? So I think a lot of it just comes down to what your quarterback's going to do. And so let's see what happens. Let's see what happens. Like, it's not like Tim Tebow wasn't a winner. It's not like Aaron Rodgers isn't a winner enough. He's like getting them to the playoffs every year. How many teams don't even make the playoffs? Like the Lions would kill to have the Packers last 7 years. Like I know they didn't win a Super Bowl, but like the Lions aren't even winning playoff games, man. So like you would think that they would bend over and do whatever they'd want for him. But what's your thought on it?
There's obviously a lot more to what's going on there, and I'm just waiting to see what they're going to get, because with the way that the issue's always been with Rodgers that they say that they never did anything to get the athletes around them, and I don't know if that's the issue. To be honest, like it's always been like, oh, they go in the draft, they draft these defensive guys. Well, when you look at teams that are consistently winning, they're guys that they have a strong defense. So why wouldn't you have that? Like, I don't know that they're far off in terms of what their needs are, because Rodgers kind of manages the game similar to Roethlisberger. I don't know. I think it's a weird situation.
Well, if you look at that and kind of like what I've read, like just the names of the people that are skipping out on him, those aren't high-powered wide receivers. Like you have Devontae Adams, that's it. I wouldn't draft any of those other dudes for my fantasy team. I'd take a flyer on them, but that's it. And like you brought up the Ben Roethlisberger thing, Cam Hayward came out and he said that the criticism was blown out of proportion over him, and people are saying that he's no longer in his prime. And now Cam Hayward's coming out and saying like, oh no, he definitely can. It's like where? When? Beginning of the season? Because like everyone can clearly see that when the year goes on, he just dies. Like it's like a reverse Tom Brady. Tom Brady comes out, he's always like garbage. In the beginning of the year, everyone's talking about how he's lost it every time. Like what was the one? It was like he's out for 5 games because he's like on suspension or whatever. Then he comes in and gets stronger. It's like watching Ben Roethlisberger, you get the hype in September. Like there's a reason like Michigan gets the September Heisman. That's what it's like watching Ben Roethlisberger. He's like, him and Russell Wilson are fighting for that September MVP trophy, where they're like, you know what, we're going to come out hot, and then I'm just going to kind of just go down and lose in the playoffs first round. Because like my man Russell Wilson, like I'm always high on him. I was high on him last year. He had great stats, and then it's almost like you get him in fantasy for cheap, play him for 8 weeks, and then you're like, I'm going to pick up or make a trade for another quarterback. And I think you could do the same with Ben. Like just get him for fantasy, play him the first half of the season, maybe pick up Trevor Lawrence in a later round because he's probably not going to get drafted high, and hope that he just balls out in the second half of the season and he's your playoff quarterback. Because like why not? You talked about the other like wide receivers though, and I mentioned it last week or 2 weeks ago. I can't remember what our show schedule was, but everyone was kind of like saying, oh, Aaron Rodgers, he doesn't have anyone to team up with. But now Julio Jones came out and said he's out. Like he wants out of the Falcons. He'll do whatever. He's done. And so I wonder if those two are going to try to meet up somewhere. Because, like, Aaron Rodgers, I think, can kind of do whatever he wants. Julio Jones, the Falcons have asked for a first-round pick. I think they'll get a 2. Like, I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Some teams go like crazy and do crazy trades with like their future picks because they think they're in a win now mode. Maybe they'll be able to get a 1 for him somewhere, even if it's not next year's. Maybe it's a 2023 first-round pick. But what do you think of potential destinations for those guys?
The scariest one that I've thought would be Arizona, because you see, like, DeAndre Hopkins is actively trying to push to get Arizona over the top, and when you look at the guys that are willing to make moves, he's already like openly said he would take a 50% pay cut to make room financially to bring Julio Jones over, knowing that that's going to free him up so much more, having that kind of receiver on the opposite side. And I don't think the NFL has seen a duo that has that type of playmaking ability, honestly, since Randy Moss and Chris Carter, that have that level of dynamic playmaking.
Well, I mean, the Falcons have been pretty good themselves. They had Calvin Ridley in him. And I think Arizona is the exact same situation as Atlanta. They are all offense. Their coach sucks. Let's be honest. Kingsbury hasn't won anything. He didn't win anything in college. He hasn't won anything in the NFL. All he has right now is hype. I don't see anything that would be different from last year to this year. Like, I don't see a big step. Even if they bring in Julio Jones, I don't sit there and think, oh, you know what, that pencils him in. Arizona's going to win the West. I would still lean towards the Rams because now they have Matt Stafford, which I think would be a big improvement. Maybe I'm wrong, but they definitely went all in. And then you'd expect the 49ers to be healthy. So then you're like, okay, the 49ers are healthy, even if they have their quarterback controversy or whatever. Last year, they had a lot of injuries on the defense and the offense, which kind of hurt them. And you're still battling Russell Wilson. And I mean, the Seahawks have been winning that division or at least making the playoffs for how many years in a row now? It's like Arizona, you bring all these offensive weapons. You don't have a defense. Are you going to still be able to score at will? Like, it's not at college, like where you're in a Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray, or not Kyler Murray. It was a Mahomes shootout where it was like 59 to 50 something. Like, in the NFL, when you get to the playoffs, it's just going to be just like Lamar Jackson and the Ravens. There are going to be defenses that shut you down. And that's it. Like, where do you go from there? I don't know. Like, how far can you go? Is Arizona going to be the spot for him? That's the one spot where if I see that out there, I'm like, all right, not a big deal. Because that would only be Murray. Where do you think Rodgers is leaning?
I have a tough time thinking like of teams right now that he goes to and is a plug and play that immediately puts them over the top. Like maybe the Tennessee Titans might be a spot, but they have Tannehill and seem comfortable allowing him to be the game manager and just running behind Derrick Henry.
We'll see. The one team. Go ahead.
I just don't think that he would like match in that because he seems to want like he has that same offensive style as Ben Roethlisberger, where he wants to be the quarterback, he wants to be the one like throwing a lot during the game and just kind of using the run as change of pace.
Well, that's where I had two things. First off, I need to make a correction because I said Arizona would get Murray, but they already have Kyler Murray. So I was thinking that he's locked in. They're not going to get Aaron Rodgers. And so only Julio Jones would go there. But I'm still thinking that Julio Jones, and they really can't come out and say it for like tampering reasons or whatever, but I wouldn't be surprised if him and Aaron Rodgers ended up somewhere together. Like, I don't think Devontae Adams is going to get out of the Packers. Like, I don't think he's going to get out of Green Bay. They're not going to lose both of their guys. And if they are, the chances of them ending up together would be kind of crazy. Like, what if they got rid of Adams and he went to like Arizona or something? Because that would be even more intriguing, I think, to me, because then you're bringing another big time player. Julio's a lot older, but like I would wonder if, just looking around the league and how teams looked at the playoffs, what if they both ended up in Washington? I mean, they were a quarterback away. I mean, they were playing a no-namer. So, like, let's go ahead and just throw him on there and possibly Aaron Rodgers, you say, well, we're going to make a move for Julio Jones and you're going to come in and you're going to win right now with Ron Rivera. And then you have a redemption story for everybody. Ron Rivera hasn't won a Super Bowl. He's been close. Julio Jones hasn't won a Super Bowl. He's been close. Aaron Rodgers has, but people are laughing at him. I mean, I've talked about it on the show. Like, the dude doesn't win. So, like, then you're putting them all in a scenario where they're going to win together or not. Because I don't know where else, like you said, Tennessee, but yeah, then they're going to mess with Tannehill. Do they end up trading him to the Packers? I thought the Packers were set at backup quarterback. That's what the GM's kind of been playing, kind of hardball or whatever. So, I don't know.
I mean, I almost think with where Rodgers is right now, he's not. Green Bay is going to want a lot in return for him. They're not going to get it. And I almost think like you're going to see a situation play out for him that was similar to Le'Veon Bell in Pittsburgh, where you're trying to demand trades, trying to demand movement, and there's just not a market for you. Like I think you are right. I think Washington could be a play just because Dan Snyder wants the big name person, but I don't know if like with the style of offense that Ron Rivera runs, like that's not a fit.
It doesn't matter if it's a fit. It's like I was talking to someone that they were like, oh, yeah, I can't wait to see what Matt Canada's offense looks like in Pittsburgh. It's like, you think Matt Canada is installing a full offense? Like, what are you saying? Like, what the hell? Like, have you not watched the Steelers for the past 10 years? It's Ben Roethlisberger's offense. He's calling the plays. Matt Canada might do some formation stuff and try to bring his shifts in, and maybe that's why they got him, to try to create that extra space. But like you're joking yourself if you think the offense is just going to magically shift to a different style. Like Roethlisberger's not coming back and saying, you know what, I am going to learn a new offense. Like that's a joke. So like if Aaron Rodgers goes to Washington, that gives Ron Rivera time to just focus on like his defense. I think the whole time with Carolina, they had a great defense. I felt like he was trying to fight with Cam Newton to try to get the offense fit into like a more pro style type mode. Then he was like kind of throwing the ball. Aaron Rodgers, you come in and you're like, all right, can you score me points? That's why we're bringing you in. I'm going to focus back on the defense and we're going to win some games. Like that's what I would do if I was him. Because like I said, he hasn't won the big thing. He's not going to win it without him. So, like, where else is he going to go, like, from there? Like, there's not really anything. I mean, he's been a defensive coach his entire career. He even played linebacker, right?
Yes.
Yeah, he was an All-American linebacker. I just looked it up just to make sure so I wasn't, like, someone laughing saying, no, he's a quarterback, you idiot. I mean, he was the Bears defensive coordinator. He's a linebackers coach for the Eagles. Like, he's mainly defense. I think that would be the most hands-off where, hey, Aaron, this is what I want. Can you control the ball, keep the ball moving, keep my defense fresh? I'm going to focus on the defense. Like, I think that's where he needs to be, hands-off. And then you're looking around the NFC, and you're in the same situation. Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay, he's looking around and he's saying, Drew Brees is out. What teams am I really competing with? Maybe those ones in the West I mentioned. Other than that, it's just Tom Brady. That's the guy I have to beat. Let's go to Washington. They were close last year. in the playoffs with a no-name quarterback. And no disrespect, but it's like I can elevate this team. You just get me the defense there, and let's go for it. I mean, maybe a change of pace or whatever would be good for both. So, like I'm looking to see what else they can have. Because, like, right now what they have, Ryan Fitzpatrick, Kyle Allen, or Heineke again. And then if Aaron Rodgers goes anywhere else like that, I think that would be it. Like, there's nothing. I mean, Dwayne Haskins, getting Aaron Rodgers would be the only redemption for that. I mean, I don't know. I don't have any other thoughts on it. Do you have anything else?
No.
I mean, those are my things. We're going to keep an eye on it because, like, right now, it's really the only thing that we have NFL-wise going on. And I'm looking it up. I typed in Aaron Rodgers, and a lot of people are saying Washington. I've been saying that for a couple weeks because, like, that's the one team that makes sense. And, like, they let Alex Smith go, and they're like, I didn't think that was going to work out. And see, that's where I think Ron Rivera is overstepping with that. And then he's going there. But, like, they need a quarterback that can win. The only other team that I think that possibly both could hook up with, and I know I'm just going to finish this segment, would be Denver. And they've had quarterback issues. I feel like John Elway would do whatever he can to get another hands-off quarterback. They're not as close to being playoff ready. I looked up. They haven't been in the playoffs since they won the Super Bowl, surprisingly. And, Matt, I'm looking through this list. I don't know who their quarterback was in 1977, but I assume that other than that quarterback, there's been only 3 quarterbacks to win playoff games for the Broncos. Do you know who they are?
Tim Tebow, John Elway, and Peyton Manning.
Yeah, 2 legendary quarterbacks, and then one of the all-time great, Tim Tebow. So you can say maybe we need another great quarterback, Aaron Rodgers, to come in and right the ship because it makes sense. People are kind of like they forget about Denver, they forget that they exist. There's not a lot of pressure there, I assume, because like they kept John Elway forever and he was getting killed in Super Bowls. Remember? So it's not like they're rushing him out of town. They gave him plenty of years to get it right. Although he was winning some of those other games. But I don't know. It just feels like that's the one where I feel like Denver, they luck into a Super Bowl win fairly often. I mean, I guess not fairly often. They're not like the Patriots are lucking into them. But like in my lifetime, I feel like they've lucked into a few Super Bowls. Peyton Manning only won one, though, right? There. Yeah, so I guess they really only lucked into one. Peyton Manning one.
They got slaughtered in another one.
Yeah, that was the Seahawks one. I do remember the 2 John Elway ones, so maybe that's why I'm thinking that they won more. So they basically only have 3 Super Bowl wins. Why would you not go after him? I think if there was going to be a bidding war, it should 100% be between the Broncos and Washington. Unless, like I said, like Pittsburgh is saying, like, okay, we've done it for Ben. We think he's going to get hurt. Let's see if we can flip him. Aaron Rodgers, and then, which I doubt would ever happen.
So, that would never happen. Never, ever, ever.
He's going to be the Chipper Jones, right, Matt? He's going to retire with them?
Yes.
What if he doesn't? Wouldn't that be a slap in the face? If Ben comes back this year, another postseason fade, and they're like, all right, it's time to move on. And then he signs with, like, the Lions or something after they get rid of their quarterback after that trade. They're like, that trade was bad. Let's bring in Ben Roethlisberger for 1 year. I'd be like, what are you doing? Why? They ruined the franchise over you. That's how I'd feel about it. Other guys, though, on that Steelers team, Najee Harris, dude, he's getting tons of hype, especially in fantasy football. as a high running back draft choice. And I already gave my spot on Matt Canada. That was my notes for this segment anyway. But I don't think the offense is going to change. So what are your thoughts on his production this year?
I was high on him, and I still think he has the potential to really have a special year. Like when you're looking at Pittsburgh last year and what they did down the stretch, why did they struggle? Because when they would hand the ball off to the running backs, they would get 1 yard and they would get killed. And they never had anyone that really put Ben into a manageable situation. You know, when you're talking about game management and you're looking at what does a quarterback or what do you need to do? It's almost like a buzzword. They say get ahead of the sticks. Well, what they're telling you is that you want to try to get yourself into where if you're getting 3 and 4 yards in first and second down, when third down rolls around and now the defense can't pin their ears back and go after you. There were a lot of times they'd run the ball on first down, they'd lose 2 or 3 yards. Now you're at second and 12 or 13. They throw an incomplete pass. Well, now it's third down and long, and if they run the ball, it'll probably be a draw, or they're going to throw the ball deep. So it takes some of that guessing element out that defenses can kind of play more. They can be more aggressive knowing what the offense is going to do. When you're consistently in 3rd and 3 type situations, even if the coverage breaks down, one of the things that's made Roethlisberger really successful over the years is his ability to scramble outside the pocket. Now, is he going to take off like Lamar Jackson and go for 80? No. But all he needs to do is just get the first down. He can get 3 yards, slide, and move the chains. And that's gonna and something that's going to help them. That with having Harris, not only do I think he can run between the tackles, but I think he can contribute in the passing game too. So being able to throw the ball to him out of the backfield and being athletic on the perimeter, I think he moves the needle. You talk about time running out. I think that's where the Steelers do have that opportunity. I think he's a good enough player. You saw what he did at Alabama. That they were surrounded by superstar talent. I think those guys are there. If the giant question mark for the Steelers is, do they get the production from their wide receivers? And by production, I mean don't drop the ball and don't fumble it.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Whenever you're talking about moving the ball down the field, if it's third down or even second down, like if I was a defensive coordinator, I would have been pressuring the hell out of the Steelers, because what's the worst case scenario? Like the running back, I mean, they basically had no chance to get any yards because everyone was just selling out. Like you had a good chance of the wide receiver dropping the ball as you did of Ben completing a first down pass. So like just take the run away, and then you're basically one dimensional, and Ben's going to press even more and more. Because like if you look back, they were fine whenever they were having their undefeated streak. But then more and more pressure going on the run game. You're seeing it go down and down and down. Connor's banged up again. Like, oh, okay, what's going to happen? Oh, I'll tell you what's going to happen. Teams are just going to take away the run and let Ben beat them. And guess what? He's not going to beat you. They didn't have the guys that stretch the field. They don't have a Plexico burst, like a big target that can just get it. They have Ebron. He's dropping balls left and right. Like that was their safety valve guy dropping balls. So like now they're trying to just get some other guys. Like it worked whenever they had the bigger wide receiver for Ben that could just take some looks, and then he'd have like the speedier slot guys. Now it's like all they have is those guys, and then they're trying to rely on the tight end. But even back then, like Heath Miller, like they still had a big passing outlet. It's like they took one dimension away, and I know they tried to bring it back with Claiborne last year. Let's see if it can extend. I feel like he only had that one game, right? Had like 4 touchdowns, didn't he?
Yeah.
Claypool. That's what I was getting confused. Yeah, so Chase Claypool. I'm looking at his stats right now. So what did he have? Was it the one? Because that was my thing coming in. What's he going to do for the Steelers? But then it was like, all right, you had your breakout game. All right, awesome. Well, what happened after that? It's like, I don't know. Let's not do that anymore. Let's go back to just Ben throwing these passes to our other guys, and they weren't running the offense through him. It was just, I don't know. He had 109 targets, but he only had 62 receptions. He did have 3 fumbles, which annoys the shit out of me. Like, why are you fumbling so much? Like, you're a receiver. Like, hold on to the ball. Isn't that your whole goal? But that's one of the things that Smith-Schuster annoys me for, too. But I don't know. Let's see. Maybe he'll step up and he will become that guy. And then I won't mess his name up. Anything else you have for the Steelers or the NFL?
I don't think.
What was it? But some people were saying that Dwayne Haskins has like the arm strength. Like everyone knows he had the measurables. The majority of Steelers showed up at OTAs. But like I had said that of all the guys like that could break through for Ohio State as like a quarterback that had some success in the NFL, I thought it would be Haskins. Justin Fields potentially because he didn't have as much Ohio State experience. He was mostly at Georgia and then at Ohio State, where he went through some of like both sides of it. And you saw how that worked out for like Joe Burrow playing at Ohio State for a little bit and then going to LSU. But then he even got hurt in the NFL, so we don't know what's going to happen with his career. But that's the one with Haskins. It's like, give him a shot. If it were me, I would have Haskins play the entire first 3 games in the preseason. Just because the Steelers got stuck with 4 games, Ben doesn't need to play 3 preseason games, or even 4. 2. How many are they going to play him in? I'd play him in 1. Like, what would be the difference? They lose one more game to start the season. It's like they're already losing games in the season. Like, I picked them to lose most of their games. So I don't know. That's my last thought. We'll get some more NFL stuff once we get some more clarity. OTA started. Most of their players showed up. Aaron Rodgers didn't. Those are the big stories. We'll get into college football now. The Pro Football Focus, they put out their over and under wins for each college football team. And so I just wanted to go through some of that. I think I sent it to you. Their favorite, of course, to win the national championship is Alabama. And I feel like it's like I said, it's like in the NBA. You know who the top teams are. Like you knew going in to the playoffs for like the NBA, who's going to have the most stars, who's going to have the best chance to take a run. You knew if you're going to pick an underdog, you're going to take like a LeBron-led team. Like you know if you're going to take an underdog, you're going to take like an Ohio State or someone that has a good chance, but they're not Alabama. Maybe you take Clemson. Maybe there's another team like Georgia that's been knocking on the door. Or even Oklahoma hasn't won a playoff game. Maybe this is the year they break through. But some of their win totals and like their percentages were kind of odd to me because I know that they're taking the divisions into account. But like even looking at Florida, it's like, all right, they're giving them a 10% chance to win the East. Or to like even win their conference. But like you're telling me that they're going to win the East and then beat Alabama, like maybe a 10% chance to beat Alabama, but they're not that good. Like the Florida Gators, I would never take, even if it was like 100-1 odds, I wouldn't throw money on it for Florida to win the SEC. Like they haven't shown me that they can beat Alabama. Like there's only a few teams that even come close or have beaten them in recent years, just much like Ohio State. Like Ohio State, if you want to take a sure bet to win the conference championship, I think they have like, I don't know what the actual odds are, but they have like a 2-1 odds to win the Big Ten. You can double your money. Like that's easy money. Are you honestly thinking that a Northwestern or whatever team comes from the West, Iowa, is going to beat Ohio State in the championship game? It hasn't happened. It hasn't happened. Same with Oklahoma. What are their odds? Oh, their odds are a little bit better. So they do have better odds than Ohio State. But it's almost like, all right, if I'm looking at these, that's what I'm looking at. But I did want to get into more instead of just like their picks, because sometimes their picks, like Cincinnati, they have like as a 12th ranked team. That has to be based off last year's rankings, even though they kind of reshuffled them because they have Pitt ranked now. But it's a little odd, I think. But did you have any thoughts on this before I kick into it?
I didn't really have too many initial thoughts. I mean, I thought for what the silly season is right now, I think a lot of the picks were kind of par for the course. They were safe. I don't know. What were your thoughts?
Well, I'm going to go through. I'm going to mainly focus on the Big Ten quick because they have Ohio State winning the conference, and then they have Iowa in the top 10, finishing in the top 10. They think that they're going to be the team from the West, and I want to say, are they the only ones? Oh no, Wisconsin. So they basically have it as a toss-up. I was looking for Northwestern too. But they have Northwestern just falling off. We know that they had a couple of top draft picks in the last draft. But they're saying that whoever wins basically the Wisconsin or Iowa game comes out of the West, which I think is pretty par for the course. But then the one thing that stood out to me, because if you're looking just in terms of pure talent and stuff, they have Penn State ranked 19th, but actually in terms of odds, they have Indiana as the better team to compete with Ohio State. And I know a lot of people were high on Indiana, and if you can get odds on it, I would hammer that under. Where were their total wins? Because I'm going to try to go through this. Because as I'm going through and I'm looking at this, it's almost like, what are you doing? Like, how? How? Like, how would they even? Because they're going to have to beat Michigan, Penn State, and Ohio State just to win the East, I would assume. Like, you're not going to have a good shot at that typical years. Like, I know, okay, yeah, let's go ahead and say that they have a good shot, which maybe Indiana does. But just in terms of talent, you're not beating those teams like every year, like even 2 years in a row. Like, I think last year was an anomaly because of the shortened season. Like, let's just be honest. I just don't think that that's going to be the matchup. Like, let's see here. I'm looking at the Vegas type over and under wins. So they're having them at 8 wins, which I want to say is the odds for Michigan. Yeah, 8. And then I think Penn State might be at 9. But of course, in conference, they all have the same total. But I'm saying, like, if you're looking at that from Indiana, and I'm going to pull up their schedule here, I think that's the one team, as I'm looking through this, that I say no. Like, I just don't think, in terms of, like, safe bets, I would be shocked if they came out and won, like, the Big Ten. That's just my thing. Because, like, even looking at their schedule, oh, man, they have to go to Iowa to start the year. Then they have Idaho, which you could mark that down as a win. But then they play Cincinnati. I would assume Cincinnati's better than them. Then they're playing at Western Kentucky, which isn't a pushover. And then their conference. So they weren't even coming in with 4 out of conference wins, Matt. Like last year, would they have 6 in the Big Ten? You're right at 8 there, so you're at a push. And that's counting Iowa as like a loss or even part of the Big Ten. Like, that would be their 6th win. You're looking at it, Idaho, Cincinnati, Western Kentucky. Can you get 2 more wins there or 3 to win your bet? I say no. Like Penn State, I don't think that's a win. Michigan State, I don't think that's a gimme. They're going to Maryland, and they play Rutgers. They also play Minnesota and Purdue as their other crossover games. Like, I just don't think that the hype lives up to them. I think that's the one team, as I'm looking through these preseason things, that are going to fall. And I'll have one last thing here. Because if you're looking at like Penn State and Michigan, 8-9 wins, they should easily have 9 wins every year, both of those schools. Just in terms of recruiting. And it's not like they're playing tough out-of-conference games. It's not like Michigan's playing Washington and then playing Notre Dame like they used to in the past. Like even Michigan's 2021 schedule, and I'm going to bring up them and Penn State because those are the other ones where I think if you're looking at it in terms of what should they be doing, Penn State's already at the 9, so going over is kind of tough. But if 9's going to get you a push, who cares? Like their non-conferences, Ball State, Villanova, and then Auburn. Which you can say, okay, maybe Auburn is a loss, but Penn State, you still have, that's 2 from them. You play Illinois, that's 3. Maryland 4, Rutgers 5, Michigan State 6. So then you would have to say that they're going to lose the Wisconsin game, Iowa, Ohio State, Michigan. Like, I just don't think it's going to happen. Like, I think Penn State would be one where the 9, like, I would be safe. If that drops to like 8, I would say hammer the over. And I think Michigan, and maybe I'm wrong, but like this has to be the year for Harbaugh. If he wins less than 8 games, I think he gets fired, if I'm being honest. Because they play Western Michigan, Northern Illinois, which should get you 2 wins there. They're playing Washington at home. The away game got canceled. Then they're playing Rutgers, which they should not lose. And if they do, then that's embarrassing. They get Nebraska, Northwestern, which should be down. And then Wisconsin is their crossover game. Like that should be their toughest game. I don't think they should lose to Nebraska or Northwestern. And if they do, like I said, Harbaugh's gone. So you're looking at 5 or 6 wins right there, not counting Maryland, Indiana potentially, Michigan State, which has been tough for Harbaugh for some reason. I think they're like so those are the ones in the Big Ten. The Ohio State one, I would stay away from just because it's so high, and I don't think they're going to keep that high level. Like I think if you're going to bet on Ohio State, you bet on them to win the Big Ten. You get better odds, and what like their win total is over 11, which I think is just the regular season, right? Because if you're adding in a bowl game, then I would even feel comfortable saying Penn State's going to get 10 wins. But that's just me. Do you have any thoughts on the Big Ten ones?
I think the Big Ten, like, this is where I always have kind of an issue because I feel like they've front load the Big Ten with a lot of these teams in these early season rankings, where realistically, like, you can't have that many people be ranked that high. So you kind of just throw all these guys in right off the bat, and then it's like, well, now we're guaranteed. We have three or four teams close to the top that now we can almost solidify a playoff spot.
Well, that's what they're looking at. Like the Indiana-Iowa game to start the year is brilliant in terms of the Big Ten because if Indiana loses that game, Iowa's going to be ranked in the top 10. Like Pro Football Focus is right. They're going to look at that Iowa team and say that's a quality win over Indiana. And if Indiana wins, then they're just going to say quality win for Indiana. Brilliant. Let's bust them up. The only downside is that Indiana plays Cincinnati. That's the only downside. Because if Indiana beats Iowa and then Cincinnati roasts them, like then the Big Ten is kind of like, but like if Cincinnati, and then like if Cincinnati's their only loss or something crazy happens, like I just don't think if football's still a team sport that's full of talent. Like talk about like the transfer portal and stuff, and there's been some rumors that some of the smaller schools like Cincinnati are complaining about the 1-year transfer rule because schools that are bigger, like a Penn State, looks at that and says, hey, we saw like so-and-so as a breakout tight end. We need a tight end this year. Let's just message him and see if he's interested in transferring to Penn State. Some of those guys for the smaller schools, they didn't hear from them recruiting because recruiting is still about camps and it's still about access. If you don't have money for some of these like poorer areas, to be honest, and you don't get to those camps, you're not recruited. You could be a 3-star. People always say like, oh, so-and-so was only a 2-star or a 1-star. It's like they didn't camp. That's it. That's the only difference. Or they're playing at a school where they couldn't get into a private school. And some of those private schools recruit and basically pay for those guys anyway. Like that's why you know some of the names of the high schools like IMG in Florida where they're pulling guys from Pennsylvania or all over the country. Like if you don't play for one of those teams, you don't know what your recruiting is going to be like. And they'll always say like, oh, well, he played against lesser talent in high school. So now the one-year transfer rule is kind of giving those schools a do-over for some of them smaller areas. I don't think it really affects maybe like in Cincinnati because Ohio is so highly recruited. But like even down here in like North Carolina, App State just built a brand new facility. North Carolina has top talent come from there. A lot of the guys though, they're not really ranked that high for whatever reason. And it's not like they're putting out like no NFL talent. But like I think that's where like you can look at schools traditionally like Eastern Carolina that had some big guys come through there, and then like an App State that had some guys that might have been less recruited. Now they have one great year at one of those schools, and they're going to get the call up to the bigger school. Like I just think that you're going to have a chance to see it, and I think that it also hurts some of the smaller schools inside the Power Five, and I would even include Indiana as one of those schools that is at risk, much like Maryland, much like Rutgers, where if you get a big-time player and Alabama wants him, guess what? They're going to get him. I mean, Tennessee just lost a couple guys to Alabama. Ohio State just lost a guy to Alabama that was complaining about playing time. How idiotic is that? I'm not getting my playing time at Ohio State. Let me go to Alabama. Like, that makes zero sense. So I think it's only going to get crazier and crazier as coaches like promise, like, hey, so-and-so, come on out. Come on out and let's see what happens. But that's my thing. Like the Big Ten, like you're complaining about like the rankings and stuff. A lot of it's media hype, but some of it's based on last year's success. Like Indiana would never have been there anywhere else. If Michigan shouldn't even be there, to be honest, except for they're recruiting like gangbusters still. And I still saw an article that said like, oh, Michigan and Jim Harbaugh are losing the transfer portal. And it's like, at this point, it has to just be clickbait because they landed Jordan Whitley from Oregon State, who was so big at 358 pounds that because of his weight and health issues, the team didn't clear him for practice. I don't know when. Like I know he's had injuries. He came as a junior college transfer, but then now you're looking at like the one transfer or whatever role where you're looking at a player that, hey, I've had issues staying healthy and getting on the field. I'm getting up there in age. I need people from the NFL to see me. Where am I going to go? Am I going to stay at Oregon State where no one watches TV? The Pac-12 can't even get their games on TV. Or am I going to go to Michigan? Like it's a no-brainer. And so that's where I think a lot of people are going to be shocked whenever this kicks in and they start paying players. Because like you're complaining about the Big Ten now, just wait. Because a school like Indiana is going to have to start recruiting transfers hard. They're going to have to start doing even more. And then you're going to see more of their other schools in the mix, almost like the SEC. Or they can just turtle and give up. I mean, kind of like where Vanderbilt's now. Are they even trying anymore in the SEC? I don't know. I don't know. After James Franklin, what have they done?
They just invested within the last 6 months, upgrading the football facility, upgrading like some of the other stuff to it that they're making a push to be more competitive because they were primarily the baseball school of the SEC, but now they're upgrading football and basketball to try to be more competitive.
Matt, their over and under is 3. Would you feel comfortable taking the over?
Negative.
They play an 8-game conference schedule. Like Vanderbilt could easily just say, you know what? We're going to schedule, and I'm looking it up right now because maybe they do this. They could schedule a bunch of Villanovas like Penn State did. Because if you remember, like Penn State wasn't knocking down the door to play on big programs. And don't even come at me, Penn State fans. Because like I remember Penn State's opening years where it was like Vanderbilt, Buffalo, Akron, then some other no-name school, and they were telling Pitt, like, oh, we can't take you, Pitt. It's like, what, you're playing Akron? You're losing to Temple? But you can't play Pitt? Like, what are you doing? So Vanderbilt plays ETSU, Colorado State, UConn, and then what's their last one? Wait, which one of these other ones isn't in their division? Stanford. That's where they made the mistake, Matt. Stanford should not even be on this list. They should have went with Alcorn State or someone and just brought them in and said, you know what, we're going to get our over and under bumped up. 3 is pretty embarrassing. They're saying that we're going to lose every SEC game and then just beat those 3 schools that I named, potentially. Or who knows, maybe losing to UConn and winning one of the other ones. So that's the one. Texas Longhorns stood out to me because they're at 8-2, just like Penn State and Michigan, right around that same range where I think they should never be lower than that. They should just be chalked in. They're in a conference where you're out recruiting everybody. What are you doing if you're winning like 6 games? Done. You should be fired. Who else? Notre Dame. Notre Dame is going to be a tricky one because they're back to their regular schedule. Their over and under is 9. What do you think of that over under for them?
I do like that one because they also have enough like other games into their schedule as an independent that I think they can get there.
Because that's one where I think that should be locked in too. The only one that stood out to me though is that for whatever reason they decided to schedule Cincinnati as well, which I'm not saying Cincinnati's going to come in and be a world beater this year. And maybe they scheduled it before they took a good turn, but they play Toledo, Cincinnati. They also play Wisconsin. It's like you cancel the Michigan and Michigan State games, but yet you add Wisconsin, who's been better than both of those programs the past couple years. Like it makes 0 sense for Notre Dame. They play Purdue, of course, and then their ACC schedules: Virginia Tech, North Carolina, Virginia, Georgia Tech, and then their opener. Florida State, baby. What do you think? Florida State have a good chance?
I think it depends on how they're doing with the transfer portal. I mean, I obviously am very, very biased towards Florida State, but for as shitty as everyone's saying that they are and that they should be, they're recruiting a lot better than what they should and what they are. They've been very active in the transfer portal. There's an offensive lineman from Marshall that is really high on their list. All weekend I was seeing stuff about trying to get this Madden to campus, and he scheduled his first official visit with Florida State. So there's a good chance that they could end up bringing him in if they get the offensive line help. They have the other. I think they have the consistency from some of the other positions, and you're seeing they're getting the right guys in position. Like I think they bring in a Mackenzie Milton who's won at UCF. They already had Travis, who was when he was healthy, played really well for him. It's like they're starting to get some of these guys rolling that I think they have a chance, depending on how they close with this class, to start pushing Clemson again on that Atlantic side. And what doesn't surprise me with that ranking system is that the ACC teams outside of Clemson are all on the coastal side. So they loaded up with Miami. They have Pitt. They have UNC. That's like they so desperately want to try to push for another ACC team. I think that's what hurts them in a way because they're like, oh yeah, push like every year. How many times do we have to hear that the U's back? They're not back. They haven't been back since 2001, like in video games. That's where they're back.
Hey, that's what
But
Texas has been saying.
yeah, and the same deal. They have nothing to show for it.
Well, see, the difference is, and that's where I would put Florida State up on the Michigan tier, just because I don't think it's really going to be a breakout. They both have the same exact problem. Recruiting is not the problem. It's coaching / quarterback play, which, I mean, other than that, like, you have one rival. You beat the rival, you get to the playoffs, you flip the narrative immediately. And then everything else goes away. It's not like recruiting has been so bad. Like, I saw a couple, like, you're talking about the transfer portal and stuff. You can fill that out, but at some point, like, the recruiting's already there. It's on the coaching. Like, people were talking about Harbaugh's retooling his recruiting staff. It's like, no, look at what's been doing. You guys have been recruiting top 10 classes. What the hell are you talking about? Maybe you need to come up with like a better clock management staff, or like
Well, you
maybe
have
not
that.
lose to Michigan State when you're clearly better than them. Like maybe have quarterbacks that are ready to play instead of looking like they're high school freshmen out there. Like at some point, it's on the coaching. Like another coach could step right in, and both of those programs could just be elevated to the next level. Maybe they don't need a new coach. Maybe it just takes like that shift. Like Florida State's been going through it. Maybe that locker room shift takes a year or two, and then they make that jump. And that's where, like, the Ohio State thing, if I was betting just on their win total at 11 wins, like, eventually they're going to fall off. Like, Oklahoma would be the one that, what's their win total? I'm looking to see. They're at 11 too. They're the one where it's like, all right, am I going to take that? Because I don't really see any Big 12 teams really stepping up. Texas potentially making moves, but it's not like Kansas fired Les Miles and then they hired like who they get, the guy from Buffalo. Like, they're trying to invest, but like not that many other programs. Like Oklahoma State, status quo. Oklahoma's most likely going to beat them. Like I just don't think in the Big 12 that there's any big money teams bringing in better recruiting classes or anything that's been any different for Oklahoma. The Big 10, like you said, you're getting some other teams mixed in that might make it tough for Ohio State. Plus, Urban Meyer's influence has to wear off at some time. I mean, he brought a lot of his support staff to the NFL. Does that have an impact on the Buckeyes? Are they going to fall off? I mean, when he left Florida, that program fell off. Is it going to happen, or has Ryan Day kind of stabilized it in 2 years he's been there? We don't know. Those are the ones where, if you're there and looking at it, and your coastal stuff, they're 100% promoting that. Not, I don't think, to get another team in the playoffs. I think they're just trying to push Notre Dame at this point to look at that and say, like, look, Notre Dame, it's wide open. You came in and played with us for a year and made the playoffs. If you get 10 or 11 wins this year and don't get in, or have the same record and don't get in, I think that's a good selling point for the ACC to say, hey, join us. And my final thought was, I saw an article, I think it was one of the guys from The Athletic that got linked around. He said that he thinks conference realignment is over. 100% wrong. Until Notre Dame joins a conference, it's not over. Because, like I said, if they expand the playoffs, which is already on the table, conferences are going to shift. If they expand it to say like automatic conference bids get in, that's the biggest pressure for Notre Dame to just say, you know what, we're going to join a conference. And just like that, a bunch of other things are going to fall. Like, it's not like conferences are automatically going to kick teams out. Like, they're not going to say, all right, you know what, Nebraska, it didn't really work out. Your team kind of sucks now. Like, the Big Ten's just going to kick you out. Like, I don't think that would happen. Like, Nebraska might leave, which would be idiotic based on how much money they've been bringing in. But, like, if they go to conferences automatic bids, I don't see how any way Notre Dame wouldn't join. They don't make as much money. They wouldn't have the same chance. Why not? So that's my final thought. Do you have anything else?
Well, there was one of the things that you'd brought up, like as far as the recruiting, the thing that I don't understand with Michigan is that when you look at like their classes are always very highly ranked. What I don't understand is you never see like the consistent blowing out of teams that you would expect. Like all of their games are like almost like vintage Penn State with Joe Paterno. Like we don't want to make anyone look bad. So whether you're playing Alabama or you're playing Army or you're playing the School of the Blind, it's like we're going to win 17-12 or 17-13. Like regardless of who you play, there's never like when Florida State was pushing for in their national championship run, they were scoring like close to 40 points a game. Ohio State like mauls people by 50, 60 points. Michigan does not take that jump, and I think that hurts them in some aspects because for them to take that next step, like I think they have to show that they have the recruits and they can put their the foot down on the pedal. What's hurt Florida State, by that same note, is that when you go back and you look at some of those recruiting classes, yes, if all you recruit are wide receivers and defensive backs, well, then you're screwed. Like I think you look at Michigan's getting by with some of these tighter games because they're filling offensive line, they're filling defensive line, they're playing like they're winning the trench battles, and they can get into these slugfest games and win out in Big Ten country where you're dealing with more poor like more cold weather scenarios that help them compared to where Florida State was just like we're going to whiff on every single quarterback prospect, and then in addition we're also going to not recruit the offensive line and just put up empty cans of soda and hope that the quarterback has enough time to throw downfield. Like that's the absolute recipe for disaster. And as they're starting to build some of that recruiting up, and I think if we didn't have the transfer portal, this probably would have taken an additional 5 to 10 years to finally like cycle the players through to get to where you're being more competitive. I think the transfer portal has helped specifically Florida State in this of being able to see which linemen are there and get guys that have contributed in other programs and can get them to fit. When you look at from a leadership standpoint, that's one of the things that's separating the programs right now, like Clemson and Alabama, from everyone else, is that they have that leadership or had leadership. I think in Clemson's case, we'll see how they do without Trevor Lawrence, but they have these issues where the leadership's there, and then players start taking it for granted. And then if you look at some of the articles written about those teams after Florida State won the national championship, the talent, like they were recruiting high talent, but they weren't recruiting high character. And so some of those guys that were coming through were more focused on establishing their individual brand and stuff that we complain about with the Steelers. That worried about trying to get to the league and worried about themselves and not doing the stuff to be the best teammates, being in the best position to do its best for the program. And I think it shows by how poorly some of these games have been over the last couple of years. And you've seen some blowouts that under normal circumstances should never have been the case. And I think like you see the glimmers of hope because they beat North Carolina. They played for at least a half competitive with Notre Dame. So it's not like they're completely fallen off by the wayside, but I think it's getting back to being disciplined. It's back to being physical and actually being fun to watch. That was one of the reasons I started watching Florida State to begin with, was because it was actually fun to watch them play as opposed to these ass beatings that they've taken over the last couple of seasons.
Well, see, I'm glad you brought that up because I think you must only watch like certain games because I'm looking at Michigan's margin of victory, and they've had under Harbaugh at some points better margin of victory than Ohio State. Like even going back to 2016, I'm looking to see if I can get. I'm gonna try to pull all these out. The only one I didn't pull up was 2017 because that's the year they were on their third string quarterback John O'Corn. But like 2015, 256 points. The season, points allowed 168. That was pretty good. Right behind Ohio State there. They had 282. 2016, Michigan had 331 points. And points allowed was only 164. Like, they were absolutely crushing teams that year. Ohio State gave up 245 points that year, even though they had more points. 2000, which one did I say? Was it 17? Or no, maybe I missed one. So 17 was the year where they barely outscored some teams. That was the year where Wilton Spate got hurt with the neck injury. So they only had 211 to 175. But 2016, I think I skipped this and read the wrong year. Yeah, they had 333 points for their team. Only gave up 105 on the season. Like, that's traditionally near national championship level. Like, that was better than the Buckeyes that year. 2018, I think, was similar. 331 and 164. That's the one I read before. So, like, really the only difference is if you look at Michigan's season, if they have a competent quarterback, crushing teams. And, like, these are years, Matt, where you wouldn't even think, like, oh, Michigan had a great quarterback per se. Like, I don't think anyone would look at those years and say, oh, those margin of victories, like, they must have a Peyton Manning type quarterback. They're not even getting drafted. Like, if they had an NFL type quarterback, like, I think the numbers would be even more dominant. Even in like a year like 2019, where they had some issues, like they 287 points, gave up 178. Like that's the one year where Ohio State really pulled away, and they scored 439 points just in the Big Ten. I'm looking at the Big Ten conference only. So, like, because I'm not throwing in Michigan absolutely destroying like Akron or whatever those teams are. This is the Big Ten conference differential. Like, they're absolutely killing teams. It's just whenever they don't show up against like a Michigan State, it's like, all right. So even under Harbaugh, last year was the only year where they didn't have a major margin of victory in the Big Ten. They were outscored 170 to 207. And I don't even know if it was quarterback issues last year. It could have just been team issues. Defense is bad. The defense in 6 games gave up more points than in some of their entire 9-game seasons. 2018, the entire year, they only gave up 164. 2016, 105, like I said, for all 9 games. Last year, Don Brown's defense gave up 207 in only 6 games played. So maybe the change of coaching will help. I just think that if you get a competent quarterback, it completely changes it. Like, look at Penn State. They had the same issue last year. I'm trying to go back through. But back when they had, like, McSorley even, some of their, like, they were outscoring opponents similar to Michigan, not as high. Because there were some games where Harbaugh really ran up the score. But that 2016 year where they won the conference, they were similar to 342 to 133. So I think that's the one where the talent, like you said, it does play out. And it's there. I honestly think it's just quarterback. If you can get consistent quarterback play, you can absolutely destroy teams, which is where I think they're on that level. Are they going to get to the level like of Ohio State, 436 to 116? That only happened 1 year. That was Ryan Day's first year. I mean, last year the numbers are kind of screwed because they only had 5 games. But we'll see if that happens for Ohio State again. Because I think if that happens for Ohio State and Michigan can get back where they were, do they get 2 teams in the playoffs? I mean, Notre Dame got in last year. It's just you can't lose to Iowa. Can't lose to Michigan State. You can't lose to these other teams. It's okay if you lose to the Buckeyes. Maybe Penn State every other year or something. But you shouldn't be losing to like Indiana. And so that's where I think Ohio State has that edge. Yeah, it's great if you blow out all these teams, but like, where's that extra loss coming to? Like, what was the 2000 and what was this one? Oh, it doesn't have the schedule filled in. I tried to see if ESPN would show me the schedule. I just can't remember. And we've gone long, so I don't want to spend any more time on it. But that's where it is. They're always dropping the one extra game for no reason, even if they're killing everyone else. So,
And that was kind of the thing that stands out to me is that there was always been, and even in those years where they lose to like a Michigan State or someone that they're not supposed to, there's always at least one other game that comes down to the wire that they end up winning, whether it be overtime, last second field goal, things like that. That like I think in the back of people who don't consistently watch, like I don't think that I'm a faithful Michigan football watcher, but it's like those are the games that kind of stand out. Like we joked about it a couple years ago. They scheduled Army for their first game. Like why would you do that to yourself in your non-conference and schedule them early? And then Army took them to overtime. It's like then when you're fighting for that playoff spot, they're like, yeah, but you had to go to overtime to beat Army. Like it doesn't help your case for the voters when you could just schedule Delaware State and win by 70.
we'll see. Looking at this 2018, it was Notre Dame, which goes back to your point. Why schedule that game? If you don't play at Notre Dame, you're in the playoffs because your only other loss is to Ohio State. So, like, that's how close they've been. They were ranked fourth. They were ranked fourth until losing to Ohio State. If they don't have that Notre Dame loss, hell, they could have been ranked 1. Ohio State could have been ranked 2. They would have fell to like 3rd or 4th. And so that's where it's almost like if you're going to play 9 Big Ten games, don't play any tough out-of-conference games. Like, they crushed Western Michigan 49-3. Do that. Why lose to Notre Dame by 1 touchdown? Like, it makes 0 sense. That doesn't help you at all. That only hurts you. That dropped you to number 8. So I guess if there was an 18 playoff, they would have been in. But if they go to 16 playoffs, who knows? So that's the one thing where if you're looking at it, you got to just, you can't schedule like those tough games. I just don't think it makes sense. Unless you're in like the Big 12 or the Pac-12 where people like question your conference strength, no one ever says, oh, the Big Ten doesn't have enough tough teams. Like, they never say that. So, like, why are you hurting yourself? That's my final thought. Because, like, that's what I think pushes Notre Dame to the ACC. Because, like, you're looking at that. Their schedule this year, even with Stanford and USC, which are unknowns, mixed in, it's fairly soft, if we're being honest. Like, they play the Navy. That game wouldn't get any respect. We said it, you just brought up the Army game. That didn't give Michigan any respect, even though Army was ranked at that time. Like, people say, like, oh, that was a ranked win, but it was Navy. Or but it was Army. So there's no reward for this in Notre Dame. If they play the same exact schedule, but they're in the ACC championship game, that's a big difference. There's a big difference. And so that's what I think pushes them to join the ACC. I think they look at the schedule and they say, like, look, we could be in the conference championship game every year. We would be playing Clemson every year. So I just don't see anything against it. But we'll look at some more of these. I'll try to find some other conferences. There's too many teams to go through all these. And even compare them to, like, the recruiting rankings and their over and unders. Because, like, Indiana stands out to me. I think you can hammer the under. I'll try to look for some other ones that I think would be good bets. But that's all we have. Do you have anything else for the final bell?
Yeah, we had our historically we've over the last couple of years we've talked about our Central PA Football Coaches Association player combine, and it's typically been on a Tuesday. This year, to try to work around some of the COVID things, we had it moved to Sunday, and so it was kind of nice to be able to get out. And there were about 300 players from the area that came out to Bald Eagle and were able to do some preseason combine things and starting to get ready for summer football. And I've always liked that because it gives you a fair starting point to see where kids are with, like, their bench and where they are with some of those running and agility things that you can compare that to the end of the year and go, okay, when right as summer breaks and you're getting into fall camp, did you get faster? Did you get stronger? Did the weight training that we were working on, what do we need to improve on, and I kind of like that. But plus it's great to have that time to be out with the kids and in a more relaxed setting. So it was definitely a fun experience and enjoyed that this weekend.
Did they have any other limitations because of the coronavirus stuff?
Some of the stuff, like the kids had to wear masks in between stations, and they really did a good job of kind of having the team spaced out so that everything was outdoors. Obviously, like there wasn't like the indoor where we were in the weight room for the benching part. As we were rotating around, there was enough that like the kids, when they were competing, they could pull their mask down or have their mask off, but then in between events, they had to have them up as a precaution. Um, but those were the main things for it.
Yeah, that's cool. I was just wondering if they had anything dramatic about it, but I know things are opening
No,
back up.
dare I say, things are getting back to normal.
Yeah, you do say that. All right. Anything else you had?
No, just excited for summer to be starting. Got some good things in store.
All right, cool. Once again, thanks for listening. And if there's anything you want us to talk about, please let us know. We'll see you next week.